I'm now going to hand over to Dave Barry, the Deputy Auditor-General and Chief Operating Officer.
Thank you, Andrew. Good morning and welcome. My name is Dave Barry. I'm the Deputy Auditor-General, as Andrew said. For those of you that attended this forum last year, you can hopefully recall me speaking about how we were using technology to fundamentally transform how we complete your audits by automatically acquiring your data and our analysis of that data in order to deliver you more efficient and more effective financial performance audit outcomes. But in addition, at the time, I spoke about how we were using technology to fundamentally transform our business internally, both from a data protection viewpoint in going with 100% cloud first strategy, but also from an operational viewpoint. Little did we know how important those changes would, of course, become to us during the current crisis. So today I'm going to talk to you about our experiences during this challenging period, highlighting some of the key learnings, the short and long-term opportunities we have identified, as well as some of the key risks that we face. And I think I'll also recap probably on some of the themes that both Andrew and John have spoken about so far. So to give you some context around how we've gone on our journey, you're hopefully seeing some of the summary stats from our recent staff well-being survey, and also some of the positive comments that we received from our staff on your screen. Thankfully, the feedback has exceeded our expectations. And in terms of reflecting on why this is the case, I believe there have been two key drivers. Firstly, the crisis coincided with the conclusion of a very driven and direct phase in our organization's development. This was really a phase that we needed to implement to bring our organization to the maturity of where it needed to be at. However, in late 2019, with a lot of the heavy lifting complete, we made a deliberate change to the rhythm of our organization, slowing that pace of change so that we could adopt a more communicative and engaging approach. It's been really clear to us that those technology changes we built to support this direction were really valuable to us in terms of communicating during the current crisis. Now, of course, for some of you around the table, I was going to say, the virtual table at least, who know me, you'll know that I believe in the transformative nature of technology as much, if not more, than most. And I'll have to say, in recent years, I've thought about why that is the case. I suppose reflecting on growing up in Ireland, I learned how to write computer code in my cousin's house, and I'll have to say it was a straw-roofed house with no running water and a donkey and cart for transport. Now, I should hasten to add that my cousins were well behind the times. I'm not that old. But I don't want to waste your morning with stories of donkeys and carts and learning to write code in paper notebooks. But what I can observe from my environment growing up is that technology dragged a nation from relative poverty in Ireland to being the largest exporter of computer software in the world. And no doubt that's fundamentally shaped my belief in how technology can transform your lives. Somewhat concerningly, and reflecting back on what both Andrew and John have said, if I look back, I'm not sure that public sector technology has moved significantly since the dot-com era. John talked about the volumes of underlying technology that date back to more than 20 years ago. But perhaps more concerningly, if we think about our end user systems, most of them have their genesis in that era. So what excites me so much at the moment is it's a shift to a third wave of modern technology, a wave underpinned by software as a service solutions where organizations like ourselves in a 100% cloud environment are able to deliver solutions that are absent of complexity, that I believe offer real ability to transform the lives of our clients, our communities, and our staffs. It is these new contemporary tools that have really enabled us in the current scenario to respond to the needs of our staff and to our clients. We were, as Andrew said, the first agency to have all our staff commence working from home on the 16th of March, over 12 weeks ago at this point in time. We made that decision because our technology gave us the confidence that we could. And from the timeline that you'll have seen earlier, you can see that we were able to contact every staff member late on the night of Sunday, the 15th of March, after the SMG virtually met to determine that we would start working from home. And as we all know, it's one thing to communicate, but it's another to know that your message has been heard. And it was immensely reassuring when I did that post to see people reacting immediately, within seconds, by liking the post, and within the hour to see that almost every staff member had signaled the message had been heard. And the immediate responsive positive feedback was very clear. I'm sure I speak for most organization leaders when I say the one thing I wish we could do more of is communicate and engage with our staff. And I'm sure we also all understand the practical challenges of being able to do this in the progressive workforce like ours, in a way that workforce demands and deserves. So if there's one thing that excites me about what I call this third wave of technology, this third technology revolution, it's our ability to engage with our staff and clients in a way that feels like how we engage in our personal lives through social media and other mechanisms. For those of you using these new types of technology, I'm sure things like email will feel like a distant and ineffective memory, something that's almost been relegated to the status of a letter, at least as it comes to internal collaboration. Specifically during this crisis, we have used our Microsoft Teams solution to engage with our staff, be it our 10 crisis-related updates, where 970 individual reactions have been received, or our 9 live briefings where we've had over 1,100 attendees. All along the way, it's kept us really connected. And I can assure you it's that connection that also kept a number of us going during the challenging times where, like in many of your organizations, we were working obviously incredibly long hours in the beginning. That connection causes you to maintain your motivation. And we also used solutions like Microsoft Stream to ensure that nobody missed any message by being able to watch and rewatch any live event anytime. Of course, we also use these new tools more operationally during the crisis. For example, we understood our staff's equipment needs and their personal well-being by using Microsoft Forms to survey our workforce. Again, to the credit of our staff and to the credit of the technology, in every case, we received a 95% plus response rate within 1 day of issuing this survey. We use collaborative tools on SharePoint to track the purchase of over 300 new items and schedule the delivery of 600 items, from second monitors to desks to chairs. And we use Google to optimize our equipment delivery routes, routes that total the 1,740 Ks, I'm told, the distance of here to Byron. We used our FlexiCar app to book delivery vans at the last minute with no human interaction. And again, we use Stream to record driver briefings so that they could listen to them at their leisure. And of course, we use things like group chat to ensure the 4 staff making deliveries across 165 homes, which is almost every home in our organization, so that all those deliveries were achieved on time and within 2 weeks of people commencing working from home. More importantly, we feel that these new wave of tools deliver us a real buzz surrounding our efforts. And this buzz in the beginning of the transition, I think, really helped us to effectively transition. Of course, I'm conscious that many of your organizations will have used these new and progressive solutions, the third wave as I described them, to respond to the crisis in a similar way. But if you have not, and if words like reactions, posts, chat, stream, forms, etc. Don't necessarily resonate, perhaps this is a takeaway as to how you can use contemporary technology to improve your response in a crisis with less effort, and of course in your day-to-day operations. Now, I'm sure most people would say we could not have predicted potentially a crisis like this scale, but we all acknowledge through our business continuity planning that such events occur. And when I think of business continuity planning, I think about my direct experiences with bushfire and flood, perhaps of greater relevance, my experience being in the military. There's no doubt the continuity of operations, regardless of circumstances, is something that the military does very well. My observations from that experience is that on one hand, the military have very simple and clear plans that are practiced time and time again. And in contrast, the public sector plans tend to be significantly more complex and rarely practiced in full. As a result, I see a significant risk that our public sector plans are idealistic in design and fail in execution. Certainly, I can talk to our direct experience during the current crisis, where our plan provided little, if any, useful guidance. Thankfully, this was a risk we had identified and we had started to review, but that review had not yet been completed. For me, the second learning from this crisis is again that software as a service in the cloud is our friend, and that most of our business continuity plans could be reduced to a page or two if we had progressive technology solutions in place. What I mean by that is if your workforce can work anywhere any time of the day. There is no need to plan for circumstances, those old school circumstances that we think of where you have to worry about setting up trestle tables in hotels or a conference center, installing telephony, buying new computers. All of those things should be a distant memory in the contemporary world. With the physical and technology risks, continuity risks eliminated, I think the remaining risks, therefore, is one of personnel, where again, I think we can mitigate continuity risks around key staff through good business practice in terms of succession planning. I hope it's clear from my presentation so far that the crisis has been defined by an incredible response from our staff. And as Andrew briefly touched on, it's that immense goodwill and trust that has given us the confidence to now look to further transform our organisation as we start to prepare to return to work. I think a lot of us will be talking about a new normal. And as Andrew said, in our case, to better reflect our aspirations, we are calling this a better normal. We see a real opportunity to provide work from home as an entitlement rather than through a request, and to introduce new concepts in relation to work-life balance. We also see great opportunities in other areas, including the capacity to increase our diversity and reduce our environmental footprint, to name but a few. We always have a strong focus on vision and a strong focus on execution, and in that regard, we have stood up a project to execute on this vision. Of course, being careful not to replace one dogma with another. Finally, and following on from John's wise words of advice, I'd like to talk through a couple of risk examples that we see emerging. As Andrew said, we tend to informally relax our risk tolerances during a time of crisis. With more people working from home, we should shift our data protection focus towards endpoint protection. And by endpoint protection, I mean the protection of your staff, laptops, computers, and smartphones. Again, something that I picked up on John talking about, and of course, Andrew briefly touched on it as well. A key risk that we all identify during the current crisis is that some staff will have people using their personal laptops, and others will have people working off a network that is not connected via VPN. As we all know, this poses significant risks where people can use these devices as attack vectors, and when you, as John said, go back to the office, or even when you connect in via VPN in the current circumstance, that can give rise to people penetrating your network. Similarly, I think we should review our traditional network architecture, again, that has its foundation probably in an era more like 30 years ago, to determine if something called zero trust networks represent a better solution in this new world. This is clearly not something that you need to understand in detail as an audit committee chair, but hopefully it gives you a sense of the changing risk landscape. At a more basic level, there's a risk that we tolerate work environments that we would never tolerate in a traditional world, such as people hunching over laptops, not sitting on ergonomic chairs, and having really inferior work environments. This was clearly the primary driver behind us equipping all our staff's home-based offices to a standard to ensure our absolute commitment to their well-being. So that concludes my brief presentation today. Thank you for taking the time to listen to me. And if I could leave you with 3 key messages, they would be: number one, that this new wave of technology built on simplicity with a high capacity to communicate and move at pace is your friend, both in terms of crisis response, business continuity, and day-to-day operations. Secondly, I feel that there's a number of silver linings, despite the gravity of this conference, this crisis, that will present us with opportunities to fundamentally transform our businesses if we choose to take and execute on those opportunities. And finally, there's a range of new risks on the horizon defined by these changing circumstances, from the technology frontier through the occupational health and safety frontier. Thank you for listening to me today, and I'll now hand back to Andrew for any questions.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. And while I'm just queuing up the questions, your observation and mine about business continuity are very aligned, aren't they? We speak about perhaps trying to over-egg the pudding and make business continuity plans more than they need to be. I take a very simplistic approach to it. You know, I always look at it in the loss of resources. Yep. And really, you know, the 4 key resources we have are our information resources, our people resources, our physical resources, and our financial resources. And I think what you've said is that if we're set up well in terms of our information architecture, we really need to worry less and less about the loss of the physical resources. That is where our staff actually work. So we can actually start making our business continuity plans a little bit simpler. Look, I've got a couple of questions. One's an observation, and to some extent you've answered it by talking about all the benefits. But how do we, now that our thinking's been liberated about ways of working, what will it take to embed these and not fall back into old habits?
So I think I touched on it maybe twice. I suppose touching on our commitment to both have vision and execution. And I think there is an opportunity there. And the reality is as people charged with governance or as executives in organizations, we all need to look to build on these opportunities and actually achieve the vision that we can so clearly see. I don't think there's any barrier to that other than making the commitment.
Well, I think you're right. I'd distill it in one word: leadership. It's the leaders that drive the organisation, that drive strategy, and that drive change. But look, I've seen a lot of the communications that are coming out from the Secretary of Premier and Cabinet, from Chris Eccles, and you can see this emerging awareness and acceptance that we really do need to change the way we have operated, and we will change. So I'm heartened to see that and read that. I just want to make sure that it is implemented. And someone's raised a question later, which is all about, well, it's all good to talk about this, but how do we fund it? Which goes back to my first comment about, we like to invest in things where we can cut ribbons, and IT equipment doesn't really fall into that category. So I think there's a leadership point there as well.
I agree, Andrew. Yeah, I think so. But also, I suppose I'm of the firm view that good technology practice reduces cost. So I'll use our point in case. We were running 72 servers at one point in time with all of the associated overhead with those servers. By moving to a cloud-first environment, we eliminated, I'm going to say it was well over 80% of those servers. It's more like 90% of those servers. And our total cost across our entire environment for Office 365, including every element of it, including telephony and including all of the what we call E5 data protection suite that we deploy, is in the order of $160,000 per annum, so less than $1,000 per employee. There is no traditional enterprise environment that can deliver solutions at that pace. So I think funding is one thing, but commitment to infrastructure is another, and that with sensible thinking, we actually can move to new solutions at a lower cost. So I guess sometimes I worry that funding is used as an excuse to mask what is actually a fundamental inability to deliver technology solutions from a project management viewpoint.
Thanks. Look, well, just one more question. It's a bit much more prosaic and operational, but I know you know the answer to this. We've spoken about it when we were standing up our Teams environment, and then we were getting meeting invites on Zoom or Skype. You talked to me about the underlying technology. So following on from an earlier question about whether or not we'd attend audit committees face to face, and I said, well, no, we're going to use remote. The question is, well, have my agents got remote meeting technologies, my audit service providers? So
yes, so most people do. I mean, if I'm being honest, though, I think most people have stood up either Teams or Zoom very rapidly. I have two concerns on that front. One is from a security viewpoint. You can stand these things up in a very inferior way. I'm intimately familiar with the back-end security protections across all the Office 365 suites. So that's my first concern. The second thing is if you don't deploy it properly, you won't have the best operational outcome. So I think most people are grappling to have some form of video conferencing. I know all of our ASPs do. And one of the things we're in the midst of at the moment is an ASP panel refresh. And through that panel refresh program, we are going to actually compel our ASPs to leverage the environment that we have to be able to service our clients. So regardless of whether you're directly serviced by us or serviced through an ASP, you'll get the same experience.